And fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. It's genocidal to allow your enemy and oppressor to tell you your history and to tell you your current situation. For example, the white media, at least its left-wing corner, have repeated the talking point that the vicious murder of Emmett Till shocked the nation. But that's a lie. It only shocked part of the nation, and that's why a white jury and white prosecutors and a white judge smiled and beamed and celebrated when Emmett Till's murderers were acquitted. Only part of the nation was shocked by the satanic torture and murder of that child. But another part of the nation, the majority in fact, were not shocked at all. In fact, a majority of this country were delighted by the animalistic torture and murder of a child. A majority of this country were and still are happy with it and support this demonic act. Because they saw black people asserting their rights, and to this mendacious majority, torturing and murdering a black child, well, that was showing black people white power's strength. No different than the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, the deliberate targeting and murder of black children. White supremacy showing that they would brutalize and kill black children, showing how serious they are about keeping black people subjugated. To a majority of this country, the murder of Emmett Till was white power demonstrating that there's nothing decent people can put past it. And that's something you need to internalize and understand. The majority of people in the U.S. are not decent. Decency is more than just the absence of overt acts of violence and barbarism. Anyone who supports or approves of anti-black racism and anti-black violence is not decent at all, and we have to be honest about that. A majority of people in this country are either outright violently anti-black racists, or at the very least, they're supportive of and highly sympathetic to those who are. One or the other. Recently, the warrant against the white supremacist female Carolyn Bryant, who told the lie that led to the murder of Emmett Till, was found. When the issue of the warrant first came to light, the white media scrambled to push the narrative that the warrant probably was just a myth and didn't even exist. And even if it did, that doesn't matter because it most likely can't be located anyway, not after all these decades. And then the warrant was found. And since there's no statute of limitations on murder, we see the white media trying to run cover for the murder of this child in other ways. This is the standard playbook by the white media whenever black people have been wronged. Now this week, a grand jury in Mississippi failed to indict Carolyn Bryant. I didn't even know that a grand jury had been convened, so this is all just judicial theater. Racists using the courtroom to try to influence public and political opinion by putting on a pathetic show where they claim to have presented evidence and their hand-picked group of flunkies didn't indict. Oh, Carolyn Bryant has been de facto exonerated. Now, everyone knows the old saying that a grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. And that is true, and as we saw in Ferguson with the case of the corrupt DA Bob McCullough, who wanted to bury the prosecution of the murder of Mike Brown, and more recently with the thug Daniel Cameron, the hideously corrupt Attorney General of California, who got caught lying to the grand jury and telling them not to indict, we understand that grand juries will do whatever the prosecutor tells them to. Grand juries are convened in secret, so prosecutors can tell them whatever they want, and there's no defense attorneys present, no opposition counsel at all, so the grand jury simply hears whatever the DA wants them to hear. I mean that literally. The prosecutor basically acts as legal counsel, if you will, for the grand jury, advising them on the relevance of the information and evidence presented, and advising them on the law. In many cases, the prosecutor will tell the grand jury that they themselves convened that, well, there's no case here, and even if you think there is, well, we most likely can't even win in court. That's what they tell these grand juries when they get them behind closed doors. But they don't tell the public that at all. That's the legal instruction these corrupt DAs give these grand juries. And then when the grand jury inevitably comes back with no indictment, the DA will then say, well, we tried. It's the grand jury, you see. Well, we presented it, and they said that there's no case, so that's the end of it. Prosecutors use the secrecy of the grand jury to bury the cases that they don't want to take to trial, and then they can hide behind the secrecy of the grand jury process to insulate themselves from the political and legal consequences of having deliberately refused to enforce the law. The murder of Emmett Till, which Carolyn Bryant was responsible for, was committed in 1955. The resulting outrage from the conscientious minority in this country prompted the government to feel it had to respond by setting up a so-called Civil Rights Division in the Justice Department 2 years later in 1957. That was just a PR move meant to pacify civil rights activists and to give the white government a do-nothing organization it could point to and say, see, whenever these Negroes claim their rights have been violated, here's our rubber stamp organization who will say that it wasn't. Emmett Till's murder is credited with having started the civil rights movement, and the government's response was to set up a civil rights division in the same Justice Department that did absolutely nothing to protect black people's rights, but did everything it could to target black people. For white supremacy to set up a civil rights division is just as bogus as when white left-wing organizations set up so-called civil rights organizations like the NAACP. White power has always wanted to make sure it controls every conversation by taking both sides, and that's where the white media comes in. Framing the narrative is key to manipulating the reader and/or viewer. Take this particular piece for instance. In this case, you have the AP, that is the Aryan propagandist, who started off by saying the grand jury declined to indict Carolyn Bryant. Their very choice of words is editorializing in the headline, because if the white media doesn't like it when a grand jury doesn't indict someone like, say, Bill Cosby, then the white media headline will say the grand jury failed to indict. This clearly conveys to the reader that the grand jury was deficient and didn't do what they were supposed to do. They blamed the grand jury for not indicting. In this case, however, since the Aryan propagandist, the AP, like the fact that Carolyn Bryant didn't get indicted, they instead say the grand jury declined to indict. Then they immediately go to one of Emmett Till's relatives, a preacher, that's your first red flag right there, this guy, Reverend Wheeler Parker Jr., who said that the prosecutor tried his best, and we appreciate his efforts. Now, the first problem with that, this AP piece has a member of Till's family sympathizing with the prosecutor and saying that they appreciate his efforts. This is meant to say that the Till family agrees with the outcome of this grand jury. Well, the DA did his best, and we appreciate it. That brings us to problem number 2. Reverend Wheeler cannot say that he appreciates anything or that the DA did his best. Grand juries are convened in secret. This Wheeler guy cannot truthfully say that the prosecutor did his best because no one was allowed to see what the prosecutor was actually telling the grand jury or what he was doing. Wheeler doesn't know what efforts the prosecutor was putting forward, so how can he appreciate what the prosecutor did? How can he say that he knows the prosecutor did his best? Giving support and appreciation to someone when you have no idea what they were doing? But the white media, of course, doesn't mention any of this. Then the AP goes to another of Till's relatives. He's trying to give some sort of consolation prize by saying that Carolyn Bryant's life has been made harder because of the murder that she took part in, and well, that's some kind of justice. Black folks are always trying to find a way to feel better about being mistreated with impunity instead of fighting to make sure that justice is done. We try to feel better about the fact that we get done wrong. You see the difference between how Ahmaud Arbery's family reacted and how Emmett Till's family is reacting? This is who the AP Puff piece starts off their article by quoting. Because this propaganda piece isn't meant to inform the reader, it's meant to convince the reader that, well, there's no case here and people just need to accept that. Why, even Emmett Till's own family have made their peace with it. And the Aryan propagandists bury at the bottom of the piece the one Till family member who they saw fit to talk to, who opposed this clearly illegal maneuver by the prosecutor to bury the case. Deborah Watts said that Bryant still escapes accountability to this day, but that they're going to keep fighting. Now, if this was an actual news piece, that's what they would have started off with. Finally, this putrid piece of propaganda ends on a sour, schmaltzy note of, look how far we've come. That's sprinkling sugar on crap. Not one of the murders of Emmett Till has been punished. Corrupt prosecutors worked to ensure that they didn't get a conviction back then, and they're still at it today. So tell me what's changed. Where's all this progress the white media keeps telling us has been made? The whole "we've made so much progress" line, that's one of white media's favorite lies. They've been telling us that one since slavery. Believing the white media's lies is how you get stuck on a treadmill to nowhere. I want you to understand that with the arrest warrant for Carolyn Bryant having been finally located, this is why Merrick Garland is now suddenly making a big deal out of putting on some weak charges for the racist thugs in Kentucky over falsified paperwork in the murder of Breonna Taylor. Emmett Till had been an on-again, off-again political football for Republican and Democratic administrations alike for the last 15 years or so. But with that arrest warrant having been finally located, well, they're looking going, we better move on to something else. We don't want to touch that one now, not anymore. You see, the idea behind the murder of Emmett Till and the refusal of the white authorities to punish the killers, the idea is that it was never supposed to be punished. That's the entire point. This is white power showing that it can murder black children. You can know that they've done it. You can know who did it, but the killers are never punished. Well, 2020 showed what the response to that is. Justice is no accident, any more than the electronic device you're listening to me on was made by accident. Justice is a deliberate, intentional thing. It doesn't just happen, it has to be produced. 2020 scared the administrators of white supremacy because when people showed that they would not simply allow murderers to walk the streets, the prosecutors understood that they'd better start bringing cases. Because if they didn't, then the same outraged masses who were making it clear they were willing to punish the police themselves, they would also have no problem holding prosecutors and judges accountable who refused to enforce the law. Because the thugs in blue were also impossible to indict or convict until people began making it clear they would personally hold the police accountable. Then, just like that, 150 years of legal immunity for the police disappeared in an instant. That's the lesson here. The refusal of the judicial system to punish Carolyn Bryant isn't some failing of the law. It's the system working exactly the way it's supposed to, and the white supremacist administrators of it doing what they're supposed to. The system counts on the people sitting on their hands and just letting these racists allow murderers to walk. They count on the people doing nothing, and this will continue to go on as long as the people allow it. I guess people will just have to figure out for themselves if justice is whatever some racist prosecutor, judge, or white media outlet tells you it is, or if justice is what the moral segment of society understands it to be. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Sandra Bates, Wesley Monroe, Aisha Sarpong, Cordelia Dudas, and Larry Amayo. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment